Greetings, brothers and sisters. I am Father Aaron Leach, and it is time once again for another video sponsored by these wonderful people over at our Patreon account. We owe you folks a massive debt of gratitude for sticking with us through these economically trying times. You are truly the reason we're able to keep going with this channel. If you're just joining us and you would like to participate in supporting the channel, as well as gain an opportunity to make suggestions for future videos, as well as get some discounts at Doc Solomon's Occult Curios on products and classes. Then I'll have a link to our Patreon account in the description, and we would love to have you join us over there. For this month's video, I decided to pick one question in particular that was asked by a patron, as I think that it's something fairly obscure. It's very important, it's very vital to magical practice, and yet it's something that is often overlooked in occult texts and classes and teachings. So let me get right to it. The question actually comes from our patron Broberlish Hode, and what he would like to know is simply, do I have any experience with magic, or you could even say miraculous events taking place beyond the ritual work, outside of the ritual space and the spells that are cast? Do I ever have entities respond to me without the need for all of the bells and the whistles? And I hate to use that term because they're not bells and whistles, but all of the elaborate rituals and protocols that have to be followed. And I do think this is very important, but in order to answer the question, I'm going to take just a step back. And I'm going to ask a question of my own. This is the Key of Solomon the King. It is an absolutely foundational Western occult text. This grimoire has probably been published more than any other grimoire in existence, except maybe for another version that's called the Lesser Key of Solomon. But my question is, why are these books called keys? And the answer to that question is because the book itself promises to be a key to open a door. And in this case, specifically, a door between the physical world and the spiritual world where all of the angels and the spirits of this system reside. I have stressed many times to my students that the most important aspect, the most really foundational aspect of this entire tradition is in making contact with the spiritual entities and building relationships with them. The real magic is not contained in this book. This book is just an instruction manual for building a device, a radio, if you will, that you can then use to make communication with the spirits of the system. The real magic that you will learn will come after that. After you have used the key to open the door, you will begin communicating with the entities and building relationships with them, and they will teach you spells. They will teach you rituals. They are the ones who are going to guide you. Now, I'm not saying that, once you've performed the rituals in the Key of Solomon, then you never need to crack open another book. In fact, the spirits will guide you to further books and as they teach you. But one way or the other, you will learn the real magic, either directly through or under the guidance of the spirits of the system. So, even though we tend to think of magic from the standpoint of the rituals, the protocols, the correspondences, all the stuff that you do that is the practice of magic, we often tend to forget about how that's supposed to apply out in the real world, when we're not dressed in robes, when we're not waving wands around, when we're not burning copious amounts of incense, but just out in the mundane world, going to the store, driving through traffic, facing the worries and the dangers that we're all facing, that we face all the time, but especially right now, with the economic crash, with the spread of the COVID pandemic, political upheaval. I mean, this is a very chaotic time. And so it's a good question to ask, how does all this work that we do apply to the world outside, because it's really not about just sitting in your room and burning candles and hoping for the best. But I'm digressing on that. But the point I want to make is that we really are supposed to build relationships with these entities. And before I go on, I want to read some excerpts to you from my old tome here, Secrets of the Magical Grimoires. This is coming from Chapter 8 on angelic work, and I say here, finally, remember that once you have made contact with an angel, the lines of communication are officially opened for both sides. As your relationship with the entity grows, you will find it easier and easier to contact it in times of need. You may need to do little more than open the book and recite the conjurations. Likewise, the angel will become part of your life and may influence or communicate with you at any given time. Summoning a celestial being does not mean you are confining it to your presence to interrogate and send away. Instead, you are inviting it into your life. So that speaks a lot toward what I was saying about building a relationship, and that it does work both ways. You should expect these entities to make contact with you as often as you're making contact with them. And they will choose to do that at the appropriate times, regardless of whether you're sitting in a ritual space with the candles and incense burning and chanting an invocation, or if you're driving to work in the morning. They should make contact with you. Now, later in the book, in chapter 10, where I'm talking about talismans and magical images, icons, occultic objects, physical objects which have ritually had spiritual entities bound to them. For example, here in my house, I have altars set up to all of the 7 archangels. Those altars, of course, have talismans. The archangelic ones have statues to the archangels and magical images and all of that stuff, as well as the colors and the incense that's burned, and all of the protocols are followed. And those angels literally live there, or at the very least, when they visit here, that's where they land and that's where they reside. It's like you can look at it as a guest room for them. So when I work with these entities, I go directly to those altars. This is where I build that relationship. It's where I make offerings to them and give them gifts, and again, burn incense and use the oils and give them water and all sorts of wonderful things. And I also put my petitions to them there, where I ask for favors in return. And I take care of them so that they will care about me and respond to my times of need. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Here in chapter 10, if I can find my place here. Let's see. One of the most intriguing things about these shamanic magical systems is the simple fact that their gods and familiar spirits are always close at hand. There is no need for elaborate ceremonies or summoning or drawing down the spiritual creatures. Instead, the shaman merely needs to approach an altar and speak directly to a physically present entity. At most, a song and or musical instrument like a rattle or a drum or a sistrum, etc., might be used to awaken or stir up the spirits. And of course, one must feed and care for the sacred object on a regular basis. And of course, in the Solomonic system, rather than drums and cisterns and rattles, we use the invocations, the celestial invocations, as you'll find in like the Key of Solomon the King, the Heptameron, the Veritable Key of Solomon, the Hygromantia, as well as the Psalms that we use for each of the entities as well. They respond very well to chanting or singing the Psalms. Now, later in the book, in chapter 12, Conjuring Spirits, and in this particular part of the book, I'm speaking specifically about the Goetia of Solomon, which is a book that teaches you how to summon 72 chief spirits from the chthonic realm. And here I say, the idea is to summon the demon with all of the conjurations and requisites outlined in the Goetia, but to never have to repeat those ceremonies twice for any one spirit. Once summoned, and bound to the talisman, and sealed in the vessel, the spirit should always be conveniently on hand as a familiar, in the same manner as the Santeurian Ganga, which is basically a pot with a familiar spirit in it. So again, this is about giving these entities a physical place. In speaking about, talismans and altars and such, giving them a physical basis that they can come down here and stand on, the same way your spirit needs your physical body in order to manipulate the world around it, they need the same thing. So this seems to be getting a little bit off the point, but trust me, I am leading back around to Broberlish Hote's question, because the point here isn't cultic objects and altars, but the point is building that relationship, and also achieving a point where you don't need all of the rituals and all of the summonings and all of the complex things that you see in the books. When I go up to these altars, in fact, I have a video earlier on this channel where you see me doing one of our candle offering rituals, and I show you how I open the altar, and it's very simple. I light candles, I use oils, I light incense, and I read Heptameron conjuration to wake the angel up, and then I just talk to them from there, and I'll use tarot in order to get responses from them. That's just the way I've chosen to work with them, or they've chosen to work with me, as the case may be. So it's the relationship, and the relationship means that I don't have to cast a full circle and spend 9 days in purification beforehand, and and use all of the tools that are listed in the Key of Solomon with the different knives and the special robes and all that. All of that, going back to the beginning of this conversation, is the radio, the apparatus that you build in order to open the gates, the key to open the door, and call them through. But once called through, as I said in Secrets, once you call them through, and especially if you bound them to a physical object, now they're there, and you don't have to go through all that elaborate ritual a second time for that entity. Now, if you're going to call another entity, then yeah, you're going to have to go through the whole thing again. But this entity that you just summoned and attached to a talisman or to a statue or magical image, that entity is now there, and as long as you feed and take care of it, then already you will see that those rituals are not so necessary any longer. And again, the entity will tell you, well, this is how, now you have me here in this talisman or image or statue or icon, and this is how I want you to wake me up. That's exactly how it worked with my altars. So that's why I have that very simple altar opening ritual that I do. And it takes maybe 5 minutes instead of taking an entire month or an entire week or however long the ritual, the initial summoning ritual would be. So having said all that, now let's take this out into the world, okay? So I have built these relationships, and I've gotten these entities to be a part of my life. They are familiars, and again, familiar, the root of that word familiar is family, familia. So these 7 archangels that I have altars to here are members of the household. They're part of the family. So where we go, they go. They follow us. They look out for us. They take care of us. Why? Because they have a reason to care what happens to us. The offerings we give them, and the prayers and the candles and everything that we do for them, and the gifts that we give them, and we care for them just like you would care, for a loving family member. Like if grandma or grandpa moves in, and you give them their own room, and you make it nice for them, and you make them comfortable. And in this case, grandma and grandpa are the Archangel Michael and the Archangel Gabriel, and these guys can actually go out into the world with you, watch over you, and protect you. So have I had instances in my life where when the rubber meets the road and something happens, something dangerous, and just out of the blue, the angels or my familiar spirits will reach out and protect me? The answer is absolutely yes. I can give you a couple of examples right off the top of my head. For example, I was once in a very bad car accident. I had pulled into across a road to a median area in order to cross the next lane of traffic. And when I stopped in that median, someone coming the other direction across the road that I had just passed, they actually hit me on the driver's side of the car, spun the car completely around. The kicker to this whole thing, though, is after the accident was over, the police investigated the situation. They looked at the skid marks, they looked at the positions of the cars, okay? There is no way my car had made it to that median first from where she hit me. None of the vehicles could have ended up where they were, and the skid marks wouldn't have looked the way they did if I had actually made it that far out. What would have happened in that case was her car would have hit mine directly in the driver's side, which would probably have killed me instantly, and I believe it would have then pushed my car as well as the other car out into oncoming traffic on the other side of the road, and then we would have had more traffic coming in head on at full speed. So who knows what would have happened. Carrie was with me that day in the passenger side, my wife, and she would probably have gotten hit, and the person in the other car would probably have also had yet more collisions. I mean, it would have been terrible. Who knows how many people could have been hurt or killed in that. But somehow the physics indicated that my car was further back than I remember it being. And so the other car hit me in the front driver's side tire well, crumpled the front of the car, sent me skidding around in a 360-degree circle back the way I had come into the empty lane of traffic. And the other car went forward and actually stopped on the median itself, up on the embankment of the median, and never went out into the oncoming traffic. So there's no question, and in my mind, that something is wrong with the physics there. I distinctly remember getting to the center of that and putting on my brakes and then being blindsided. But somehow things were changed. Reality was changed. Something was switched around so that even though the accident still happened, not only was nobody killed, no one was actually severely injured. We all walked away from that. My car was totaled. I don't even know if the other car was totaled, honestly. It's happened quite a while ago. But so everything worked out, and I know for a fact that my guardians reached down and tweaked that situation just enough so that everybody walked away. Now, another example that comes to mind, I used to work overnights in hotels doing the auditing for the hotels, and that put me as the only person there in the middle of the night to deal with anybody who wanted to come in to check out a room or deal with any problems. So it was on one of these nights, someone came in and robbed the hotel. I had a knife put to my throat. It was a very tense situation. But what really stands out to me about that to this day is that through the entire situation, from the moment it went down, I was hearing a voice. I was hearing the voice of my guardian angel, and she was telling me every detail of what I needed to do, what moves I needed to make, what I needed to say, what I needed to not say, and when it was time to do something, told me when to do it. It was a very incredible experience. And again, I walked away with a few knife wounds, but the guy ran off. I was able to chase him out with his own knife, and everything came out okay in the end. But it's not like I had to tell this guy, well, hang on, before you put that knife to my throat, I'm going to go around into the back office, and I'm going to do some invocations, and I'm going to call it, and I'm going to make these offerings, and then I'll come back out. No, it was a split second, and that angel was there already, knew it was coming, and knew exactly what to tell me to do in order to get through that alive. So this is the kind of thing that not only, it's not just a question of, have you ever experienced it? It should be a statement of fact that you should experience this. If you're doing your magic and it only applies to you when you're at home in your robe and doing the full rituals, then that's not real magic, because that's just the preliminary. That's just the key work. But then it has to go outside. It has to go with you into this dangerous world, and it has to really pull through for you in an instant. You have to go out with your army of ancestors, your familiar spirits surrounding you, your guardian angels watching over you, and they have to pull your fat out of the fire, because that's why we do this. It is a dangerous world, and we're all subject to the various currents and flows of nature as they move, but we want to try to have as many of those forces of nature on our side. We want those forces of nature to have some reason to care about us and want us to live to see another day, to want us to come back home and keep making those offerings, rather than ending up on the side of the road dead, or in a hotel lobby bleeding alone, far from help, or whatever your situation may be. So absolutely, resoundingly yes. I have had experience of magic taking place outside of ritual, and so should you. So build those relationships, and remember that the magic is not in the books. The magic is not in the armchair you're sitting in. Get up, do the work, build those relationships, make them like you, and learn to like them, and make them part of your family, and then they're part of your army. And that, as the Key of Solomon says, will then make you invincible. And I think that's all I've got for this recording, folks. I hope you found it somewhat enlightening. And like I said, I will have a link to our Patreon account in the description. And don't forget, if you like the channel, hit subscribe, ring the spirit bell to summon us to your inbox whenever we post new content. And be safe, and blessed be.